Hey everyone, welcome to today's show on Wealth Strategy Secrets. Today we're joined by RJ Burr. RJ is a third generation producer of American oil. Born into the industry, he was on his first location before he could walk and has been fascinated by the production of oil his entire life. Within 3 months of graduating high school, Mr. Burr funded his first partnership and never looked back. RJ is the Senior VP of Corporate Operations at Panex. With a main focus on the Gulf Coast, Mr. Burr's companies have raised and deployed over $300 million in upstream development and have partnered with some of the largest oil and gas companies, namely Shell, BP, and Marathon, to develop several million barrels in reserves. RJ, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Great to have you on the show.
Oh man, it's what else would we be doing? I mean, if it wasn't fun, they'd call it work.
Exactly. That is the key right there, right? To be having fun and, making a difference in what you're doing.
You talk to your kids and you tell them to follow what you love, and I hope you find some type of career where it's something you can be. Well, I tell them, look, when you're looking for something fun, a habit, find you a habit or something that you can make money doing. Otherwise, you're essentially just killing time.
Very true. Very true. So RJ, why don't we kick things off a little bit? And, for folks who aren't familiar with your background and everything, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into the oil space? Clearly you started at a very young age. So must have been some influence there from your family. So how did it all start for you?
Well, it starts in Maryville, Louisiana, a town about the size of an acorn. That is where my mom and dad are from. And when they got married, and I believe I had my second oldest sister. I have three older sisters, and by my second one, my dad's grandpa passed away. And when he was on his deathbed, my dad walked in to see him, and this was somebody that my dad had a tremendous amount of respect for. And Papa Burr looked at him and said, Bob, when you leave this room, I want you to walk down to the end of the road, just an old dirt road, and back. It's about 2 miles. He said, I want you to look around. He said, when you get done, I want you to go get that wife and go get those baby girls and head for the lights. This town holds nothing for me. And what he was telling my dad is that if dad stayed there, he would be the same. And it's not a bad life, but it would be the same as everybody else who had been in Maryville their whole life. And he knew my dad had something that most people didn't have. He had a spark in him. And so that was when my dad started his venture and moved to South Texas from Louisiana, got in the insurance business, and was a tremendous salesman. I believe the good Lord gives everybody one or two talents. It's your job to find what those talents are. And one of the talents that he gave my dad was the ability to sell. And dad started out in insurance. And when he was 27 years old, his brother gave him a call and said, Bob, I'm up in Dallas. I've got a gig. I think you could be good at it. Why don't you come up and see what we're doing? And so my dad drove up there, and my uncle had gotten in the oil and gas business, and they were funding a well. And my dad sat there and listened to the guys talk on the phone and how they were presenting. And it took him about an hour. And he looked at Uncle Gene and said, Gene, give me some leads and let me see. And he grabbed it and he got on the phone. And by the end of that day, in his mind, he knew I could do this. He called my mom, said, pack it up. We're moving to Dallas. And that was us getting in the oil business. I was 1 year old at that point in time. And so this is all I've ever known. Some kids get to grow up watching their dads practice law or practice medicine or teach or work in. I got to watch my dad in oil and gas. And so when you look at the industry, I love history. History is the greatest story ever told. And there's a reason that second generation family businesses, that third generation family businesses, that all of a sudden that second and third generation, they know things inherently because they've been around it their whole life that you can't learn in a classroom. And that's how you build your major corporation or your companies that can last years, because you have generations of families that have learned from past generations. If let's just say they've touched that stove for us, so we know it's hot and we don't have to touch it. And that's basically how I got in the oil and gas business. I knew what I wanted to do, graduated high school, started funding programs, and have never looked back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's very unique, right? A lot of times people are in family businesses and might have some exposure there, but to see that for multiple generations, very unique. And like you say, it definitely adds, it says something about the industry. And so speaking of industry and history, and, you talked about history being, really the greatest, teller of information and source. For folks, we have a lot of listeners that are really new to the oil and gas space, right? And may not be necessarily familiar with the history. And I think there's also a checkered history, right, in oil and gas, right? There's been some different
Yeah.
things that have gone on. So can you tell us a little bit about really the history of the industry and where it is today?
Well, I mean, you made a great point. And it goes with pretty much any industry where there are wealth creating factors like there are in oil and gas. You're going to have some snakes get in that industry, and the dream, the prize, that the brass ring is changing your financial future. Well, how many industries can take $1 and turn it into $100 overnight? And so that's what oil and gas can do, because I believe what everybody is coming out from under the illusion right now. I love movies. Well, one of my favorite movies is The Usual Suspects. And one of my favorite quotes in that is, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And how I look at oil and gas, I kind of want to modify that quote a little bit and point it towards the green energy movement. The greatest trick the green energy movement ever pulled was convincing the world that oil was bad, because we're all dependent on it. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter who you are. If you live in the modern world, you're in the oil business. We all consume it. And there's as much as I want a clean environment, as much as I want beautiful, pristine landscapes. I mean, I believe everybody has a little environmentalist in us. However, what we want and desire doesn't match what is. And what is that there is nothing on the market that can replace oil. And so you go back and you look at the history of oil, and really it has, I believe we're in the third generation of the evolution of oil. The first was in the beginning. You had the seven sisters, your seven major companies. They basically controlled the oil market. They manipulated prices for good and for bad, for the government and for themselves. It's all out there. Anybody who wants to see it, it's easy to research. Just go dig it up. You can find this history. It's well documented. Well, in 1960, they changed the entire landscape, and that was the second life of the oil industry. That was when OPEC was created. Well, the reason OPEC was created was to counter the Seven Sisters power. And for the last roughly 60 years, that has been the power structure in the oil industry worldwide. Now, what happened, whether you like President Trump or don't, is really irrelevant, because what happened with the explosion of the US shale industry, all of a sudden, it took some of OPEC's power. All of a sudden, they didn't have a say in determining prices like they used to. Well, they wanted that power back. And so that's where everything was setting here about 4 years ago. Now, when you look at the industry, this is another great trick that they've been able to pull and convince everybody. When you think of, you walked out in the street and grabbed just the average American and said, name one oil company, name one American oil company. Everybody go to Exxon. Everybody go to one of the majors. Well, the problem is that's not the domestic oil and gas industry. 90% of your gas and roughly 83% of your oil is produced by roughly 9,000 independent oil and gas producers. Those oil and gas producers average 12 employees or less. That's your oil and gas industry. That's who produces America's oil. Now, I'm not saying Exxon and them don't produce oil in the United States. They just don't, that's not at the top of their priority list. And so when you look at everything that has happened over the last couple of years, in most people's eyes, their perception of, oh, well, the oil industry is getting hurt. Well, heck, it's Exxon, it's BP, it's Shell. They're massive. They can handle that hit. Well, that's not who was really getting hit. It was the ma and pa's. It was the independent producers that were getting hit during all this. Now, this kind of actually walks perfectly back into what we were talking about a minute ago when I was talking about generational people that have been in a business for several generations. When you've been in this business as long as, say, just take my family, as long as we have, when you see things happening in the market, you're able to anticipate where it's going to go because you've seen it before. Well, that's exactly what we did. We saw Russia and Saudi Arabia increasing production because we know the numbers. When you look at worldwide, oil prices have averaged for the last 20 years roughly $60 a barrel. When the United States, most of your independent producing oil companies were created during those last 20 years. So they've built their world around $60 oil. Probably need 50 to 55 to pay their bills, and they make the profit on the last $5. Well, knowing that, we figured Saudi Arabia and Russia would flood the market, push the prices down. Well, if you need $50 to $55 per barrel to pay your bills, and all of a sudden prices are 40, does that put you in a bad position? Absolutely. And so that's what we saw coming. And that's when we started gearing up to start making acquisitions, because we knew companies were going to be in the crosshairs and they were going to get taken out. Well, then all of a sudden something happened that nobody expected. Corona came. And Corona took what we thought would take 12 to 18 months and crunched it down into 30 days. All of a sudden you had companies falling off left and right. I mean, I can remember the day, and I remember looking at oil prices, April 20th. I was looking at oil prices and watching them drop. And when it got to about $15 a barrel, I'd had enough. I said, okay, hang on. I left, and I literally went down a couple blocks down the road to Arby's, got a roast beef sandwich, came back to my office, was gone maybe 15 minutes. And when I get to my desk, I look up as I'm walking by, and I look up at the TV and I see 40. Like, oh, okay, good. It corrected, okay, I'm good. Well, by the time I sat down at my desk, it kind of dawned on me, hang on, there was a little line in front of that 40. And so, I mean, that moment sticks out in my life. In no way will I ever compare it to 9/11, but it's one of those moments that's burnt. I know exactly where I was doing, where I was sitting, what was on my desk, and what, it's one of those moments that was burned in because I didn't even know that was possible. I've been in this business my whole life and had never seen negative oil. And so all of a sudden we said, hey guys, you know what? Everybody in the world is pulling in their sails right now. Everybody in the world is battening down their hatches and getting ready to face this storm that's coming. Why don't we spread our sails out? This is exactly what we thought was going to happen anyway. It was just a different trigger that caused it. And so we were prepared, and that's what we started doing. And in the last roughly 2 years, we've acquired what looks to be 100 million barrels of oil in reserve. And all we got to do now is develop it. We know it's there. We're just going to drill it and get it out of the ground, because that's the beauty of the position that we're sitting in, is the fact that this isn't our first rodeo. We've been here. We've done this. We have partners that know that oil and gas, heck, there's a reason they give you such tremendous tax benefits for it. We need the oil. Uncle Sam doesn't do anything for free. And so that's why these tax benefits are so tremendous, because without oil, you see you see it today. What happens to the economy when oil gets to the point that nobody can use it? So you can't say that, you hate to assign motives to people, because it really just, I don't know what's in somebody's heart. All I do is look at common sense. 1 + 1 will always equal 2. And if you restrict people's access to oil, it's going to cause the price to go through the roof. Well, if the price goes through the roof, what does it do? It causes people to alter their behavior in a way in which you would prefer them to do it. And so you don't want to say things are intentional, but who couldn't? I mean, this is not something that you can't predict. I mean, you could watch what's happening and you know what the next step is. And so when we sat here and we looked at that, we said, well, you know what? Myself included, we're all getting hammered by this. You know what? If we're going to get hammered by it, by God, we're going to make some money at the same time. And so that's what we do. We put our partners on the opposite end of the fence, where not only do they see that money going out, because we all see it going out, but there's some of the fortunate few that see money coming back by taking advantage of this moment in history. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're putting our partners in a position where they have a monumental chance to take advantage of something that most people never have the opportunity to take advantage of. There's a reason J.R. Ewing had big old Longhorns on the front of his limo.
Right. So do you think that, A lot of these independent producers in oil right after the pandemic had hit, a lot of them were knocked out. And we are now in this phase where, there's a huge supply demand imbalance. Prices are going up. You've got this geopolitical things going on in terms of, the green initiative, and that's driving things up. Is that what's creating the opportunity right now? Or how would you articulate, exactly the opportunity based upon, the various dynamics that are going on in this market?
Well, one, you have to, what's the best way to put this? You have to have faith in what you see happening and how it's going to play out. Here's what I mean. Looking at the current world environment, looking at the green energy, looking at alternative energy sources, looking at renewables, looking at just every other potential source of energy that we could have. Knowing human nature, if you had invented the greatest thing since sliced bread, which that's what I think it's going to take. It's going to take a printing press type invention to replace oil. Well, if you had done that, don't you think somebody would have said something about it? Don't you think somebody would have mentioned it? And so actually that's a great lead in, because you could actually go to our website, panex.us/learn. And we have oil and gas 101, oil and gas 102, and oil and gas 103. And they basically, oil and gas 101 just gives you the history of oil, why we started drilling it, what its uses are for, just gives you a big, broad picture of the oil and gas industry, how you drill wells, what you're looking for. It's the best foundation for somebody wanting to learn the industry. It's the best thing I could give to you. Oil and gas 102 is the tax side of it, how the tax benefits can help you and your family. Oil and gas 103 delves into this, because when you look at it, well, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Take your majors. When you look at investment in downstream oil and gas, and when you look at investment in developing oil and gas, in 2013, let me check my number. I don't want to quote a number that I'm off. I want to say it was $3 billion, but don't set my numbers. But basically, in the last 8 years, we've had about a 70% drop in funds invested to replace produced oil and exploration funds worldwide. So you go in and you look at where that money went to. Well, if Exxon's not putting this money in producing more oil, where are they putting this money? Well, they're putting it in solar panels. Well, they discovered the first solar panel in the mid 1800s. If they hadn't perfected the solar panel by now, chances are they're not going to any day soon. They're putting it in hydropower. They're putting it in windmills. Well, hey, windmills are several hundred years old. I mean, this is not something that they're just trying to learn how to do. They've been working on it for years. And so when you look at all these majors putting this money into alternative energy, well, why would they do that? Well, once again, not guessing on their motivations, there really could only be one of two reasons. One, they're altruistic. They believe the product their company is producing is destroying the world. And so they feel they need to invest in alternative sources to save the damage they've done. To heck with their partners, with their clients that own the stock in the company. That could be one. They could be altruistic. Or it could be two. They see exactly what I see. They see that oil is really irreplaceable. Well, if you have 1 million barrels in reserve and you stop developing more and you put your money in something that can't replace that, and then all of a sudden, years later, you realize that, oh my God, we were wrong. How much more valuable is that 1 million barrels of oil you already have? I had a partner here, about a year and a half ago, give me a call and ask me about green energy. And at that point, I knew I'd touched a little on the surface. Heck, it's my business. And so I knew a little about it, but I'd never done a real deep dive into it. I'd never really researched to see, okay, what's the best technology out there? Is there a threat really to oil out there? And after I got through, I was shocked. I mean, here, this old redneck from Kentucky can sit down on his computer and dig through all this information and pull it all out. Well, if I know it here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, I guarantee you they know it too. And so what I mean by that is you look at Exxon. When you look at worldwide investment in developing more oil and replacing the oil that we've already produced, it's down roughly 70% since 2014. Well, where's that money going? If they're not reinvesting that money to find more oil, where are they investing that money? Well, when you start digging into it, all of a sudden you see it's green energy. Well, I know there's no replacement for oil. They know there's no replacement for oil. So why would they invest in something that they know is fruitless to replace oil? Maybe they have some new technology. Maybe they have something that we haven't heard of that's underneath the radar where nobody. Well, you look at it. No, they're putting their money in solar panels. Well, the first solar panel was discovered in the mid 1800s. If they hadn't perfected it in the last 150 years, I don't think they're going to do it anytime soon. The other place they're putting their money, windmills. Well, same thing can be said for windmills, hydropower. Well, they're putting all their money into this area that they've been researching for years already. It's not something new. And so now you think, okay, well, why would they do that? Well, once again, I don't want to assign motives. I don't know why, but I can look at it and say, okay, there's really only one or two reasons they'd be doing this. One, they're altruistic. They see that their product is destroying the planet and they want to invest in something to fix the damage they've done, regardless of how it affects their stockholders. That could be one. That could be one reason. Or it could be the second reason. They see the exact same thing that I see. They can benefit two ways by putting money in green energy. One, by putting it in there, they're going to get the social loving that they're the world's saviors. See, oh my God, look at these guys. They're putting so much money. They love our, so they get the social credit. But secondly, there's an economic motive also. When they put all this money in green energy, and all of a sudden everybody comes out from under the ether and realizes it's not going to work. How much do the oil they already have in reserves? What happens to its value when all of a sudden it's known that they need it 10 times more than they originally thought? And so when I look at motives, I really don't care why you did something. I look at what the results will be. And one of two things, they're either willing to destroy their company or they're making a play knowing what I know, that they're going to make their oil that they already have worth 2, 3, 4 times what it's worth right now and not have to do another thing in producing more oil. And so you look at that dynamic that they've set up, and I know this, everybody being in the oil business, as long as you have oil, look at everything going on in the world right now. Look at all the industries that are hurting. Do you want to know why we're not hurting? You want to know why my partners are tickled pink? Because we're able to turn the economic world lemons into lemonade because we have an asset that everybody needs. And if these guys keep doing what they're doing, you're going to see oil prices go to $120, $150 a barrel. You can't keep doing what they're doing and not expect it to result in that. Now, they might crash the entire world economy. We still need oil. Cold kills more people than heat. Winter's coming. People are going to start using the natural gas. I mean, so there's no way around it. As much as, like I said, as much as we want stuff to happen, well, as much as they want, look at California. Eliminate gas cars by 2035. Are you crazy? They can't even keep their lights on right now. And they're talking about eliminating gas cars and going all electric. People realize this stuff doesn't make sense. 1 + 1 is not equaling 2. Well, if that's the case, eventually that equation will correct itself. One way or the other, that equation will come back. Well, when that day happens, if you're sitting on several 100 million barrels of oil, knowing that that's what we need as a country, man, you're sitting in a pretty powerful position, aren't you? And that's exactly where we're putting our partners.
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com. Yeah, interesting. And I think a lot of people just don't realize, the whole magnitude of green energy as well, right? We think that, okay, if we're going to have an electric car, then we're not producing emissions out there, so we're good to go. But in the meantime, right? The amount of petroleum-based energy it took to actually, mine and create that battery in the first place. I believe it's over 70%, correct me if I'm wrong here, that went into actually producing that battery. You're driving over asphalt roads and concrete bridges, right? And all of these other things that still go into the infrastructure. So I think there's also, I mean, not only from a supply demand issue, but there's also a global infrastructure issue that's really at the heart of this as well, right? And so even if we wanted to, convert over 100% to green energy right tomorrow, I mean, it is going to take a long time and a lot of investment, right, to be retooling things, and this is at a global level, right? This isn't just the US, right? It's everywhere.
We can't, yeah. Well, look, the beautiful predictor of the future is just watch Europe. Yeah. Historically, if you watch Europe, what happens there 6 months later comes here. And so right now, I can remember a certain president telling a certain group of leaders of another country at the UN, hey, if you become dependent on Russia's gas and time gets tough, they're going to cut you off. You're at their mercy. And I remember those countries' leaders laughing at the president. Well, where are they sitting a couple of years later? Well, that's exactly what's happening everywhere. If you are dependent on as a country, if you don't control your food, your water, or your medicine, somebody else does, and they can cripple you. Well, another one there is energy. Energy is the driver to every civilization moving to the next level, and that evolutionary chain, so to speak. To get from third world to first world, you have to have energy supplies. You can't burn wood for heat. You need to have, it takes that energy supply. And when you restrict a country's energy, you restrict their growth. Now let's take it on a practical level. How many women, and this is not a sexist thing, I'm looking at some of the women I know. How many women would be happy to know, you know what, you don't get to wear makeup anymore because it's a petroleum product? You think they're going to have a happy group of women out there? No. Well, that's the everyday applications of oil products that nobody pays attention to the plastics, to the medicines, to the makeup, to the spandex. There's so much that oil is used for. There are several thousand products created from one barrel. It's not just what we put in our cars. It's not what we put on the asphalt. It's not what we put in the jets. It's what we utilize that oil for everyday products. You can grab any American, and I would bet you everything I own, you can grab any American at any point in time, and they will have at least one oil product on their body. That's how much it's ingrained itself into our society. And so it's not a bad thing. Look, we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. If you truly did want to fix the environment, you'd go nuclear or you'd go natural gas. Those are the cleanest burning fuels we have. Well, in the United States, we have an abundance of natural gas. Yes, we'd have to do a lot of infrastructure work, but not near the infrastructure work you would need for electric grid. Heck, you take one average neighborhood in America right now and make every house an electric charging station, and it crashes their grid. They don't have the energy. We don't have the infrastructure to do it. Now, in a society where the government doesn't really care about spending, oh, heck, we can redo that's jobs for everybody. Well, how do you pay for that? And does it make sense to spend 100x versus what it would cost you, say, 1x to do it on a cheap, clean burning? It doesn't make sense. When we have, you could run gas lines to each house. You could convert every car to natural gas, where you basically, just like your gas stove in your kitchen, it fills your car up when you get home, you pop it. We could do all of that. The will's not there to do it. Why? It would cost too many people that have money invested elsewhere. It costs them too much money. We were talking before we started the interview about how complex things are. Well, we as humans make things much more complicated than they really are. And that's a fact. We could do all of this for a tenth of what they're wanting to do. Why wouldn't we? Well, common sense tells me they have more to gain by going the other route and have a lot to lose by going the cheaper route. And so the money motivates everything. You hate to say it, but follow the money. That's as in human history, that's about as quick a way to figure out what's going on in any path, and it's just follow the money.
Yeah, good point, RJ. Given that, and you had your crystal ball, where do you foresee oil and gas prices headed, within the next year or two?
I can't. It's really hard to predict because, like right now, you are having a dip in demand, but the dip in demand is not because of personal consumer choice. They're being forced to dip in because you can't afford to pay for it now. So you're going to see a drop in oil and gas prices just because they're making it so hard to get. Well, on the flip side of that, once the prices go down, people will start using it again. And so prices will start going back because there's nothing there to replace it with. And so you're going to see it do this over the next couple of years until this insanity wears off. I kind of look at it one of two ways. Either America is who we are right now. It's President Biden, the Democratic Party. Either if that's who we are and that's the path the country's going to go, well, you know what? My partners are going to make a bunch of money because in the end of the day, oil prices are going to there's no telling where prices will go. They're going to make it restrictive. And so all of a sudden, my partners, while it sucks, it's that's a crude word, but I guess it's the best. Why it sucks for everybody. At least my partners will be making a tremendous amount of money during that time. Now, the other side is, let's say America does correct. And let's say we stop doing the fantasy things that we're doing right now, and we go back to sound, basic 1, 2, 3 economics. Well, you will see the price stabilize at that point. Where is it going to stabilize at? Pulling my crystal ball, I'd say when it's all said and done several years from now, it'll settle between 65 and 85. I think that's about because what you see prices do this, and I'm not saying there's manipulation to it, but it's uncanny how it works. You watch during the first Gulf War, when we first launched bombs and started doing, you saw prices go up to about 80, 85. Well, as they crossed 60, our economy kept rolling. Cross 65, our economy kept rolling. Cross 70, started to check back a hair. 75, we started to check back more. When it hit 80, the economy darn near came to a stop. Well, all of a sudden, the powers that be said, whoa, okay, there's the top. We can't go past 80. Well, it was amazing. All of a sudden, you look up less than a month later, and oil's at 65. Well, it stayed there for 20 years. And so I think this is the process we're going through again. It got pushed up to 120. And when it got pushed up to 120, all of a sudden, the brakes on the world economy started locking up. And so now it's coming back down. Well, it will find an equilibrium where all the businesses say, okay, man, I hate paying 80, but you know what? We can pay 80 and we can keep going. And so you'll see businesses pick back up at a certain dollar amount. And when they do, that's where you'll see prices peg. And I think it'll be between, trying to get more, I'd say 75 to 85. I said 65 to 85, but if I'm going to be more accurate, I'd say 75 to 85. And so now, am I going to be right? Time will tell. I don't know.
That's a very pragmatic way to look at it. I mean, I've heard analysts forecast it up to 200, right, as high as 200. But obviously, we have lots of different events going on, geopolitical events, across the globe, right? There's so many different factors right now. So it is interesting time. RJ, let's jump into tax benefits as well, because we have a lot of investors that are high income W-2 earners, making active income. And, this is really one of the, top 3 investments, that we've identified, right, that supports our investment thesis and can help investors offset their W-2 income. So for people who aren't really familiar with the tax benefits, kind of how that works when you're investing in oil and gas, can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Absolutely. As I said a minute ago, the best thing I could tell you to do is go to panex.us/learn and download Oil and Gas 102. That is a full, it's easy to understand. We just kind of walk you through the basic benefits of oil and gas investing. Now, I'm not a CPA, so don't set me in stone. I can just kind of give you a general rule of thumb. investing in domestic drilling, investing in a drilling program, you're going to get roughly 90% of your investment in the first year to write off. Cash on cash, it's going to be, let's say you put $100,000 in a program, you get a 90% write off. Well, 90,000 of that, we tax deductible. You take that 90,000, multiply it by your tax bracket, and you get the actual dollar for dollar amount. Now, like I said, everybody's going to vary a little bit because everybody's in a different situation. But Uncle Sam roughly pays for a third of your investment. And so going into a drilling program, now I had a partner tell me a long time ago, I said, well, Mr. Jones, you can write it off. And he said, boy, if I wanted to write it off, I'd give it to the Boy Scouts. And so you don't invest in oil and gas specifically for the tax benefits. However, for you to ignore the tax benefits would be a huge mistake because they are significant. You know, like I said, Uncle Sam, if you owe Uncle Sam $150,000 at the end of the year and you put $100,000 in a drilling program, Uncle Sam's going to look at you now and say, okay, you don't owe me $150,000, you owe me $115,000. That's a pretty tremendous tax saving. Now, the reason you get in oil and gas is the returns. I mean, you take we just drilled 2 wells down on the Choctaw down in Louisiana. One well had 7 pay zones, roughly 260 feet of pay. The other well had 15 pay zones, a little over 300 feet of pay. Now, each one of those pay zones is essentially a well unto itself. In the first 45 days of production, these 2 wells have produced over 7,000 barrels of oil, and we're not even in the best zones. My partners on that program, out of those 2 bottom zones, they'll end up making on a $100,000 investment about $50,000 in the first year off 2 zones that aren't our best. Now, when we move up zone, up well, because basically when you produce a well, you start at the bottom. Because if you started midway up, when you're done with that particular zone, you have to cement it, case it, well, you'd have to drill back through it to get to the bottom. And so chances are you won't go back down and get what's below. So you start at the bottom. And every time you deplete a zone, you plug it off, move up, and hit the next one. Produce it for however long, plug it off, move up, hit the next one. You realize my partners on these wells could be receiving revenue from them 20, 25 years from now. Each one of these zones should produce anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Well, in one well, I have 7 zones, and the other well, I have 15 zones. And so if my partner's investment, if these wells keep doing like we're doing, we fully expect it to. I mean, there's nothing that tells us they won't. We're already producing them. So now we're past the true gamble stage. Well, if these wells just keep doing what they're doing, my partner will have all their investment dollars back in their pocket in 12 to 24 months. And then it's gravy. At that point, every dollar they make is profit. Well, if these wells produce at these levels for 15 years, all of a sudden I have partners that have turned $100,000 into $700,000-800,000. Prices go to 120. All of a sudden that 700,000-800,000 turns into $1 million, 1.2 million. That's why people get involved in oil and gas. Now, is it guaranteed? No. If anybody ever calls you and guarantees you something, especially in oil and gas, they're lying to you. There are no guarantees. Now, what I can guarantee you is we come early, we stay late, we work hard, and we leave no stone unturned when it comes to making our partners money. Because like you're in the business. Without your partners, you don't have a business. Without my partners, I'm not sitting where I'm at. And so every decision we make has one foundational fundamental behind it. Is it good for our partners? Because if it's not good for our partners, we don't do it. It doesn't make sense. I'm here to make my partners money, not hurt them. And so when we go through the process, when the listeners are evaluating, one of the keys is find out who you're doing business with. You know, one of the quickest ways I've learned to check somebody's credibility, see how long they've had their phone number. If you have somebody who's changed phone numbers a dozen times, there's a reason. I've had the same phone number since I was 24 years old. And I'll go ahead and admit I was one of the late ones to the cell phone world. I made my living on the phone. And so I kind of, when I was 24, I lived to the mind, well, if you want to reach me, you can either call me at the office or call me at the house, one of the two. The time in my car is myself. Yeah, and that was a childish, and that was not the right thinking at that point in time, but I was young. Well, married, had a kid, and all of a sudden, my wife looks at me and says, well, baby, what happens if I need to get in touch with you? And so, I got guilted into getting my first cell phone. Now I look back, I don't even know what I'd do without my cell phone. I mean, now it's become an extra appendage on my body.
Yeah.
But you know, and so I was
Yeah.
one of those latecomers to it.
Yeah, I hear you. So I guess in closing, RJ, what would you recommend to, people who are, again, new, they've never invested into oil and gas before? We will put a link to your website and everything. We'll put that into the show notes for people to check that. But just any, your single biggest recommendation, right? If someone's trying to do some due diligence and get into the industry, what would your recommendation be?
I can't speak for anybody else, but I can speak for me. I would love to speak with anybody. I make my living on a phone. I make my living telling people what we do for a living. Well, don't take my word for it. Go to our website again, that panex.us/learn, and click on our testimonials. This is what our partners, guys that have their money with us, think of us. That's the best way I can tell you is check somebody that's done business with who you're looking at. Find out what they think of them. And I've always lived in the mind, if one person says something, might be a coincidence, might be an accident, might have an axe to grind. 2 people say something, might be a coincidence. 3 people say something, hey, there might be some truth to it. 4 people say the same thing, man, there's got to be some truth to it. And so that's why we want to overwhelm you with our partners. We want you to know that they like investing with us. Why? Not because we won every time. I will not insult your intelligence to tell you we've hit every well we've drilled. They enjoy investing with us because I'm always upfront with them. Win, lose, or draw, good, bad, or indifferent. It is what it is. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it is and not sugarcoat it. But more importantly, they know we're going to leave no stone unturned when it comes to making them money, because that's what you hire us to do. And when people and some people lose sight of this, most people didn't come by their funds, their finances easy. Most people had to give blood, sweat, and tears to earn where they're at in life. Well, man, that's sacred. If somebody has faith in you and sends you their family's money, shame on you if you don't give them everything you have, because that's what they deserve. And so that's all I can do. All I can do is show up every day, come early, stay late, and leave no stone unturned, working as hard as I can to make you as much money as I can.
Yeah, 100%. We share the same philosophy as well, and need to be critically good sponsors and stewards of our investors' capital. Absolutely.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
So really appreciate you coming on the show today, RJ. I mean, just a wealth of information and insights, I think, for folks, especially new to the space and really trying to understand, more about how it works. And especially, I think, the unique time frame that we're in for this type of opportunity. So thanks again for coming on, and we will definitely put a link into the show notes. And any other places you'd like to point out that for folks to reach out or connect with you?
You can email me per RJ Burr at panex.us. That I take no issue with it. Reach out to me. Oil and gas isn't for everybody. I'm fully aware of that. Well, you never know until you talk to somebody. Call us, see what we can do. And if it's not for you, heck, you're not going to hurt our feelings. I've been told no before. This is my first rodeo. But call and check, because we could do some tremendous things for you. And if it's not for you, I'll be the first one to tell you, don't do it. If this money would change your lifestyle, if the world opened up and swallowed our company, and it would change the clothes you wear, the car you drive, or the food you eat, it's not for you. Don't do it. This is money that you can put with our company and let me go to work. Now, if you're in that position, you need some tax benefits, and you have some free finance where you can let this old boy from Kentucky go to work for you. Hey, give us a call. Let us show you what we can do. If you want to do it, terrific. We'll show you how to get started. If not, like I said, you're not going to hurt our feelings. We've been told no before. We'll thank you very much for your friend, and we'll part as friends.
Great. All right. Thanks again, RJ. Really appreciate you being on the show.
All right. Thank you very much, man. Have a wonderful day. Until next time.
Awesome.